If you're a high school catcher that wants to play college baseball, or you're the parent of one and you're wondering what actually needs to happen each year of high school in order to make college baseball a reality, this video is going to break down that entire process. I've seen the families of freshmen and sophomores confused on if they should be attending showcases and what development actually looks like. I've seen juniors and seniors with no sense of urgency that need to get things going. So wherever you fit in on this timeline, my goal with this video is to break it down for you very clearly. And just yesterday, I had this exact same conversation with one of my catchers, Nathan, who is a sophomore catcher aspiring for college baseball. So this timeline isn't just a theory. It's the exact process that we use here at Pro Point Catching inside of the College Ready Catcher program to help our catchers and families understand what to prioritize and when in this pursuit of college baseball. And if you don't know me, my name is Coach Nick. I caught at the Division I level. I'm the head of Pro Point Catching, and we've got a growing list of 50 plus catchers that have gone on to play college baseball. So in this video, I'm going to break down what a freshman catcher needs to focus on, what then changes for a sophomore catcher, what junior catchers need to have in place to get recruited, as well as what seniors need to lock in order to secure a commitment. So here's the most common issue that I see. Most families treat the pursuit of college baseball just like a checklist of random inputs. So they'll throw things at it like showcases, camps, and player development, of course. But the problem with this approach is all of these different inputs that we're throwing at this college baseball goal matter in different ways depending on what year in high school you actually are. But college baseball doesn't happen by throwing a bunch of inputs at the goal. It's sequential and it happens over a timeline. And when done properly, each year is going to build off of the previous, and that should start when you're a freshman in high school. So if you skip steps and you start to focus on showcases or camps or development out of order with where your catcher is at and what they need, the constraint isn't going to be your effort because you guys are going to be doing a lot. But the constraint is going to be understanding where all of these inputs fit into the overall timeline and how they can eventually start to complement one another. All right, so let's dive into the high school timeline for a catcher that wants to play at the college level. And let me start by saying this. This timeline that I'm about to lay out to you is generally correct for most high school catchers. The only time this timeline would shift is if you're going to be a high caliber Division I catcher, we may shift this timeline back a year. So the exposure and getting in front of coaches that becomes more important as a junior or a sophomore could potentially shift over to a freshman sophomore situation, again, depending on the caliber of catcher. But overall, this 4-year process is generally correct. You just may have to shift a little bit depending on the caliber of your catcher, of course. So for our freshman catchers, it's almost unheard of for a freshman catcher to secure an offer because it wouldn't be smart on the end of the school, and it probably wouldn't be smart for the athlete to make a commitment so early when there's 3 years of development that need to take place before that catcher is ready. So freshman year is going to be a big decision year for high school catchers to really decide how much they like baseball and if baseball is going to be something that they pursue. Oftentimes with the freshman catchers, their focus right now is just getting to high school, adapting to that level of competition, as well as all of the changes that come with being a high school kid. So freshman year is really where we see kids make that decision as to, hey, I'm going to start to take this seriously, or maybe my priorities are going to lie somewhere else. So if we have a high school catcher that is telling us that they want to play college baseball, we're going to make sure that, number one, they can handle the demands of high school baseball, but also start to introduce some of the skill development and personal development that is going to be required to play college baseball, but at a much lighter level so that they can also adapt to being a high school student. So the big priorities for a freshman catcher are to start developing some self-sufficiency. And what I mean by that is getting them to commit to parts of their development. So depending on the athlete, this could be things like, hey, we're going to start getting this freshman catcher to start tracking their macronutrients and understanding their diet, understanding how to start eating like an athlete to support development later on, and also just to start stacking responsibilities for that catcher and starting simply. So that's something big for freshman year. Also giving them some kind of ownership of their skill development. So getting them to start handling programs like basic receiving programs, basic blocking programs, basic throwing programs, so they can really just start consistently getting reps and start putting themselves through feedback loops that are going to lead to improvement. At this point in the process, mom and dad are going to be pretty hands-on. And because of the athlete's age, you can't really expect them to be perfect or perfectly motivated. So this is often way more hands-on between the coach, player, and athlete, and it's expected. But when we get into sophomore year for a high school catcher that wants to play college baseball is when things get much more serious and a lot more of the responsibility starts getting placed on the athlete. So sophomore year is right about the time that I see most catchers really start to make a decision as to what they want to do with this game, the sacrifices and how far you actually want to take this game. And this is where we see kids either really start to take things seriously or fade away and again, prioritize different things. Oftentimes sophomore year is right about the time when catchers get their driver's license and they have the freedom to go to the facility on their own and start to handle things a little bit more without mommy and daddy. So sophomore year is extremely big for catchers to start taking things very seriously because once junior year hits and that recruiting window opens, there is no room for if we're serious about this or not. That decision should be made at about the sophomore year mark. Depending on the caliber of athlete, somewhere around that summer going into sophomore year and that summer going into junior year is where we're going to want to start to make a baseline evaluation of this catcher. So there's two different ways that we can do this. In our program, we have a checklist that our athletes go through where we measure velocity, pop time, 60-yard dash, all of the skills like receiving, blocking, throwing, as well as their personal skills. And essentially what we're trying to do is get a very accurate baseline of where this catcher is right now. You can attend a perfect game or a PBR showcase. And a lot of times for these underclassmen showcases, there's not even going to be scouts in the stands. These events just serve as evaluation tools. So whichever method you choose, just getting some kind of objective feedback and some objective measurement of where a catcher is super important somewhere in this freshman to sophomore summer, because it's going to lead into a sophomore's priorities in this timeline. So sophomore year is where we see catchers really starting to get an understanding of the fundamentals like receiving and blocking and playing and showing up consistently. Those things should be happening by that sophomore year spring. So this is where athletes now can start to focus on more fine tuning their game and actually becoming a catcher that is recruitable. So sophomore year is often where we'll introduce programs like the Drop Your Pop Time program, as well as 60-yard dash programs, and we'll start to ramp up weight training and really dialing in diet. Because again, once junior year hits and that recruiting window opens, we want to make sure we're on track to be able to present ourselves as strong as possible. So once we have that initial evaluation that happened somewhere around sophomore year, we want to start to think about where are we falling short? Where are our biggest gaps and room for development and growth? It's going to be different for every single catcher, but if that catcher is undersized or their tools aren't where they need to be, now we can really start to focus on those things, and we have sufficient time to develop these things properly. So sophomore year is all about really getting a catcher to dig in and take things seriously. And then once they do that, they understand where they're at and they can start implementing different training methods and really starting to understand how to train properly and balance everything that comes with that. And now we're going to get to the most commonly misunderstood year in the recruiting timeline for catchers, junior year. So this space from sophomore summer to end of junior summer is probably the biggest and most valuable piece of this entire timeline if you want to catch in college. Depending on the caliber of athlete will determine if this summer going into senior year is more important or this summer going into junior year is more important. But regardless, it's going to happen around that junior year. So junior year is essentially where you're going to make your money. This will hopefully be the year where you're getting in front of coaches, and that could be with exposure through club teams and travel teams and tournaments. Or if you don't have a team like that, then this is going to be through recruiting outreach and showcases and events and different things like that. But in order for these things to happen properly, our sophomore year development, our freshman year development needed to go the way that it should. So junior year is when coaches can essentially start contacting us. And I wouldn't expect on that first day when your recruiting window opens to start getting bombarded with a bunch of text messages and calls from coaches. Most of the time, it's not going to happen that way. But we can actually open up dialogue with college coaches now. So this is a very important year for us to start doing that. So in our junior year, we're going to continue working on developing skills. But at this point, the athlete should have a really good understanding of receiving, blocking, and throwing. And we should be able to shift the focus more to recruiting outreach and fine tuning things. A lot of times when catchers get to this junior year, hey, our velocity isn't necessarily where it needs to be. Our 60-yard dash isn't there. Our swing isn't there, but it's close. So once we're getting close to being on par with the level that we want to play at, we can really put a lot of our focus and energy on improving these very specific pieces of our game that have exponential potential to help us get recruited because everything previously was taken care of properly. And now those things are on autopilot. They're in maintenance mode. These catchers know how to balance a diet, balance the weight room, balance all of their responsibilities, and they can really start to hyper focus on, again, the little things that are going to provide that exponential return for our ability to catch in college. So junior year is often the year where we'll have our catchers start to make recruiting film and start contacting coaches and getting in dialogue with these coaches so that they can either get personally invited to come out to a camp where they can get seen by this coach, or they can go ahead and get the okay to send their schedules so that these coaches can start coordinating coming out to see them play. So junior year is when all of this stuff is going to start to happen. And then going into senior year, by that fall, we should have a pretty good understanding of where we think we're going to end up in this game, whether we have explicit interest from college coaches or we just have an understanding of our tools and where they're going to land us at the college level. So in that senior year in the fall, we're either going to be narrowing down our options or getting very hyper specific on the schools that we want to go to. So if you're a catcher and in your senior year fall, you're not really sure where you're going to end up at the college level, this is when we're going to start to look at more of the junior college, the Division III, the NAIA routes, because these schools are often recruiting much later. They're often recruiting seniors. So these are the schools that we're going to prioritize our focus on. But if you're going into your senior year and you have interest expressed in you, maybe you have an offer, maybe you don't, but in one way or another, you know that there are coaches that are on your trail. If that's the case, then we're going to try to maximize those opportunities. We're going to start to negotiate scholarship amounts and things like that. Or we're going to use that interest that we already have as leverage to maybe reach out to bigger schools that we think we're a better fit for, because obviously we have the proof of concept. We have schools showing interest in us. Maybe we have offers, so we can use those as a bargaining chip to potentially get to a better school or something that we think we're a better fit for. But again, if you don't have any of that, then senior year is going to get really serious about figuring out what junior college, what Division III, what NAIA program do you want to play for? Because a lot of times, if you're getting late into your senior year, a lot of those Division I spots are going to be filled, or Division I coach is going to look at a senior uncommitted and be like, okay, well, why did everybody pass on him till now? Is there something that I'm missing? So I'm not saying that if you're getting late in your senior year, Division I is out of the picture. It's just going to be much harder, and it's going to take a deeper level of focus. And my best advice for this timeline is there is no right or wrong way to approach it, But if we can be very diligent in our pursuit and make sure we're doing the right things along this timeline, good things are going to happen. And if we have the skills and the metrics to back up the level that we want to play at, then it's just inevitable that we'll play college baseball. So it really comes down to a realistic understanding of where you are versus where you want to go, and then where everything fits into this puzzle. And if we can do all of that properly, then there is a school that is willing to take you, but it's just making sure we have clarity on everything. The only time that I see catchers that don't get the opportunity to play college baseball is when their expectations are out of alignment with reality. So the more that we can just be honest with ourselves, the better we'll be able to understand our gaps and essentially fill those in. And if this is something that appeals to you, if you're a high school catcher or the parent of one and you want to work with us, you've seen what we do here in the College Ready Catcher program, or if you want to learn more, there's a link in the description of this video. You can learn what that program's about, how it works, and you can potentially schedule a call to meet with us.